Hello, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, and I'm honored to serve as Associate Minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you are carrying with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests joining us today. If you're visiting for the first time or joining us from afar, why don't you say hello in the chat and tell us where you're joining us from? I welcome you to our worship service today by inviting you to repeat our mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Let's return to our beloved sanctuary for the lighting of the flaming chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
Good morning. My name's Kevin Gibson, and I'm very happy to be your worship associate today. We mark occasions in our lives. Some become routine, and some seem to be created by Hallmark. And without exposing too much of my inner grouchiness, I'm not a great one for celebrating my birthday, so I'm not sure that merely getting older is much of an achievement. On the other hand, there are probably times we should pause and acknowledge accomplishments like graduations or awards. But when I think about it, though, celebrations are often, in effect, also a recognition of the struggles and seismic changes involved. Weddings mark the start of a new family, but also a break from the old one. Births welcome children, but at the same time show support for the difficult journey of parenting to come. I've never met anyone who felt graduation didn't involve past energy and effort, with a few dark nights of the soul along the way. Now, I've been to a few memorial services over the last few years, and not surprisingly, they give you pause for thought. We sometimes call them celebrations of life. Two in particular come to mind. One was here at First Church. People said inspiring, funny, and grateful things about the decedent. I didn't know how many lives he'd affected and the positive impact he'd routinely had, probably without him realizing it. He was modest and unassuming, but nonetheless enhanced the lives of those he met with a deft touch. At the end of the service, I mentioned to Reverend Jennifer that, given my age, the odds were that she'd be doing my memorial service one day. Luckily, though, we now had the script. I'd be amazed and grateful if people said those very same things about me, so all we had to do was change the names. In the second case, the individual was well known for his humor, which mainly consisted of very bad puns and dad jokes, as well as having a story about almost any topic of conversation. Yet, at the celebration of his life, I learned that he'd been a major force in investigative journalism and promoting a free press in the former Soviet bloc. Who knew? Both cases were hugely bittersweet. I came away knowing the world had been better for their lives well lived, but thinking, why didn't we do this when they were alive? Why did we wait until the one who needed to know they were valued and would have been missed would no longer be able to hear the message? So Reverend Dina asked me if I'd want a celebration of my life while I'm still here. And my knee-jerk reaction was to say no, as it would embarrass me deeply. But why? I suspect there are three reasons. Initially, I was repeatedly told as a child not to toot my own horn and to hide my light under a bushel. Secondly, I'm acutely aware of my own flaws, So if being told how wonderful I am, I'd always know that it wasn't exactly true and ought to be tempered by reality, so we're not left with the imposter they describe. And with the universe's ironic sense of humour, I'd likely demonstrate my shortcomings right after the celebration. Third, I think I'm immortal. Or, if not immortal, I don't think I'm going to die tomorrow. So if someone surprised me with a party all about me, I think my guest might know something I didn't, and I was about to be visited by the angel of death, which would make my evening less fun. On the other hand, maybe if I knew that I was about to shuffle off the mortal coil, then I can imagine throwing a bash and letting people say nice things. The varnished truth. If I sensed some elements of my story were to be forgiven, reconciled, and only the positive would remain in the memory. So in lieu of that, I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to challenge my family and friends to write a completely immodest pre-obituary for themselves, and then without criticism or correction, ask them to share it with me, and I'll do the same thing. It could be a ritual without a milestone. It wouldn't have to be a Father's Day or a birthday, but a regular day made special. And I'll find out more about the people I know, and we'll learn about our impact on others. I'll have to be more forthright, as otherwise I won't be able to fully value others, and may have that lasting regret of wishing that I'd said something to someone while I still could.
Come take my hand, do the dance that only you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate. Come take my hand, do the dance that only you can. Like you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate. Although the world gets weird sometimes, although we're filled with fear sometimes, we make the pain disappear sometimes when we celebrate. Come take my hand, do the dance that only you can. Like you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate. Although the world gets weird sometimes, although we're filled with fear sometimes, we make the pain disappear sometimes when we celebrate. So come take my hand, do the dance you can, like you can. Who you are, who I am, is a chance just to celebrate.
When I turned 13 years old, I decided it was time to put away childish things, as the Bible says. It was time to stop playing with my favorite toys, my little dolls. But I didn't want to just ignore them. I wanted to mark the time. I invited one of my best friends over who I sensed would understand and enter into the spirit of the event, and we played with little dolls one last time. Then I packed them up. When I was in college, my parents sold the piano my sister and I played while we were growing up. I hadn't taken lessons since about 10th grade, but still enjoyed playing from time to time. I was grateful my parents mentioned they were waiting for the new owners to come pick up the piano. It was a utilitarian transaction to them, time to sell something that wasn't being used. But I needed to mark the time. The piano had been a special place of refuge and renewal for me. Fortunately, I was able to get up to their house and play that piano one last time. I found poignant joy going through the music in the piano bench, selecting which music to take with me into the future. I think I've always been one to make the time and mark the time. That works well when I'm alone, but can be a bit maddening for my family and friends. My desire to mark the time in relationship means they have to slow down with me and help plan, or at least participate in a simple ritual. What is the purpose of marking milestones? It helps us celebrate accomplishments, mourn losses, remember important events, inhabit new roles, assume new identities, activate community support. Most significantly, perhaps, marking the time helps us make transitions. Think about your daily routine for a moment. Do you do certain things in the morning that help you make the transition from sleep? Do you have a certain thing you do to say goodbye or hello to your family members or housemates or pets when you leave or come home? Do you have a time in the day for a family meal together, marking the transition from the work or school day? Do you have a bedtime ritual for yourself, your children, or you and your partner? On vacation with my extended family years ago, in a cabin with thin walls, I was surprised to hear the tender bedtime ritual of my elders saying nighty-night to each other before they surrendered to sleep. Sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference between a habit or a ritual. I consider habits to be repeated actions, conscious or not, that serve a functional purpose, like brushing my teeth after breakfast and before bed, or folding the towels a certain way because that's the way mom did it. A ritual feels different to me. Sometimes it happens repeatedly, sometimes only once. Ritual is conscious, intentional, usually planned, and helps us make meaning and make transitions. Rituals support relationships, often using symbols and symbolic actions to help us interpret life's changes. I recognize that some people may have been harmed by ritual in the past. If you were harmed by ritual, be gentle with yourself and consider what I say today as possibilities for the future, or not, at some point on your healing journey. Family therapists Evan Imber Black and Janine Roberts tell a story in their book, Rituals for Our Times, that illustrates how ritual can support relationships. They wrote several months after Isabel and Jed's wedding. Jed's mother suddenly died, as his father had already died several years earlier. Jed's younger brother Brian, 19 years old, came to live with Jed and Isabel. This couple, in their early 20s, found themselves not only just married, but also new parents of a young adult. One day Brian said to his brother and sister-in-law, I feel like I don't have a security blanket. What do you mean? Asked Isabel. Oh, my friends at school, most of them have at least one parent still alive. They can help them if they're having trouble in school or can't find a job. And I don't have that security blanket at all because both my parents are dead. Jed and Isabel thought carefully about what Brian had said. Jed thought about the Afghan, a sort of blanket his mother had made for him when he had left home, and thought maybe he should give it to Brian. But no, he didn't want to do that. He kept that Afghan on his bed, and it was a particularly strong connection for him to his late mother. As Jed and Isabel talked further, they thought, why don't we make Brian some sort of blanket? And they came up with the idea of making him a quilt. Later, in sharing the idea with his sister, Jed found out that she had an old nurse's uniform of their mother's. His sister suggested we can cut it up and make squares for the quilt out of her uniform. An older brother had a marine camouflage shirt of their deceased father's. They added that to the quilt as well. Some old fabric was found in their mother's things. As they began to cut squares, they realized that they needed help with actually sewing them together. Jed thought of his maternal grandmother, who had sewn a number of quilts for other family members. The siblings and the grandmother began to gather in secret, sew, share memories of their parents and their earlier life. They decided to present the quilt to Brian at their grandmother's 80th birthday and to make a party for all of them. Brian received the family quilt, a blanket that symbolized both the ability of Jed and Isabel to take the lead and show creative ways in which they might parent, as well as the new networks of contact they had made between the siblings and their grandmother. They demonstrated that they all were Brian's security blanket. This story reminds me that there are many different needs for marking the time that are unexpected, uncommon, yet full of opportunity for creative transformation. Parents and children might want a simple ritual for the first day of kindergarten or to mark the transition to a new school. There might be a need for a gender affirmation ritual and/or a name change. New home blessings or empty nest rituals, or a ritual to mark the right sizing transition of leaving your house, condo, or apartment and entering a senior housing complex. Maybe we need a ritual for starting a new job or new career or new educational training track to get us there, or to mark the recovery from a serious illness. When Imber Black and Roberts discuss how rituals work for us, they describe 5 purposes. The purpose of relating, which helps us shape, express, and maintain relationships. The purpose of changing, which helps us make transitions and mark transitions. The purpose of healing, which helps us recover from betrayal, trauma, or loss. The purpose of believing, which helps us express our beliefs and make meaning. The purpose of celebrating, which helps us affirm deep joy and honor life with festivity. The story of Brian's security blanket is an example of a ritual with a purpose of relating. The authors give examples of the other 4 purposes too. Here's an example for the purpose of changing. After recovering from breast cancer, Jerry Sims had a t-shirt made that read, "Healthy Woman!" She wore this t-shirt to a family dinner and announced to everyone that they were to stop treating her as a patient, and that in particular, she wanted people to argue with her, as they had before she became ill. Then she gave t-shirts to her husband and children that read, "Husband of a healthy woman," "Teenager of a healthy woman," etc. Here's another t-shirt example for the purpose of believing. Geraldine and Willie Jackson found in their marriage that they were responding to one another as if they were back arguing with their own parents. They had 2 shirts made. Geraldine's shirt said, "Guess what? I'm not your mother." And Willie's shirt stated, "Guess what? I'm not your father." Each time they found themselves responding to each other as parent and child, one or the other would call out, "Shirts!" and they would don their new costumes. Old patterns fell away quickly. Laughter replaced bitter arguments, and they were able to begin to negotiate with each other. After a while, they only had to say the word "shirts" to evoke the frame of reference. We are probably most familiar with rituals that have the purpose of celebrating, but even happy celebrations can have many undercurrents. Imber Black and Roberts write, if you come away from rituals where you anticipate celebration and instead feel anxious, exhausted, hypocritical, or cut off from yourself or others, then one of ritual's key functions of celebrating is not happening. A genuine sense of celebration is often missing from rituals when there has been relationship cutoff when important issues have gone underground and cannot be discussed, or when losses remain unhealed, unspoken, or unresolved. When the authors write about rituals for the purpose of healing, they emphasize that some rituals may need the support of a therapist, especially those that intend to heal trauma. They tell the story of Corinne, who found that she was flooded with memories of the sexual abuse that occurred during her childhood. In therapy, she began to create a healing ritual. She selected 1 hour a day to write out the memories. In order to move the memories out of her house symbolically, she went to a coffee shop to do her writing. By containing the memories to 1 hour a day, she found that she could function well the rest of the day. With her therapist as witness and support, she made a decision to end each therapy session by burning parts of her writing about the abuse. She also sorted out certain aspects of her writing that she wanted to keep. She carefully cut and pasted paragraphs that referred to her strength, her survivorship, while burning those that described herself as a victim. She put what she wanted to save in a safe deposit box outside of her immediate neighborhood. There are many unanticipated life events that don't come with a standard ritual, but perhaps it would be healing to do so. A divorce ritual, a ritual to mourn a miscarriage, a ritual to release the estrangement of a family member or friend. Rachel Naomi Remen said, "When we bless others, we offer them refuge from an indifferent world." This quote reminds me of what we can experience when a non-standard ritual is created for life changes that we would otherwise not acknowledge. The ritual, in and of itself, is a blessing that offers someone refuge from an indifferent world. How do we create meaningful rituals? Here is my suggestion. Notice the changes in your life or the life of your community. Stop and make time to think about them. Would a ritual be helpful to support or manifest the changes? Involve people who are affected in the planning of the ritual. Create a container to hold the ritual. By container, I mean choose a time, a place, the participants, and set your intention. What do you want the result to be? Use physical objects as symbols. Create a distinct beginning and ending, and leave room for improvisation and humor. When significant things happen, we can't always expect ourselves to mark the time right away. Sometimes we need to process it before we know what we need to do. We can't always create a safe container quickly. There are too many things in play. Today, during the spoken meditation at the in-person service, we marked the grim milestone of 1 million people who died from COVID-19 in the United States. We marked this even though it's several weeks after the date those deaths reached the 1 million mark on May 17, 2022, according to data kept by Johns Hopkins University. Why did we wait? Well, there wasn't a Sunday in the calendar closer to the time that made sense for such an emotional milestone. We didn't want to mark it on Religious Education Sunday or Flower Communion Sunday or Pride Sunday. The container to hold an emotional milestone should be strong and sensitive enough to open our hearts and if possible, not clash too jarringly with the emotional landscape of the worship service as a whole. In religious community, we can take this kind of care to not overwhelm your spirits. But there are also times when public rituals need to mark losses in a more abrupt manner to get our attention. I remember the day I was commuting south on Humboldt Avenue to go to church. Pre-construction and possibly even pre-pandemic, someone had made the time to place markers all along the meridian strip at about knee height. Sign after sign after sign, each with the name of a Black person who was killed by police. Just their name and their age. It was like reading a flip book where you run your thumb over the edge of the pages and a moving picture emerges. In this case, a horrible picture. The first and the last signs read, "Say their names." So I did. I drove slower and slower and said their names and ages out loud, one by one by one, ending in rage and grief, which, of course, was the point. Melissa Harris Perry interviewed poet Elizabeth Andrews on The Takeaway on NPR on Monday, June 20th, about her new book, The Trayvon Generation. Andrews talked about young Black people creating art and rituals that bring our attention to the killing of Black people. Through a variety of methods, she said, the artists are saying, "We will not forget. We will sanctify their names." Her article by the same name, which appeared in the New Yorker 2 years ago, teaches us about celebrating blessings, about claiming the blessing of life in a culture of racist violence. She wrote, "I want my children to thrive, to be fully alive. How do we measure what that means? What does it mean for our young people to be Black, alive, and looking back at you, as June Jordan puts it in her poem, Who Look at Me?" Black celebration is a village practice that has brought us together in protest and ecstasy around the globe and across time. Community is a mighty life force for self-care and survival, but it does not protect against murder. Dance itself will not free us. We continue to struggle against hatred and violence. She continues, "I believe that this generation is more vulnerable and more traumatized than the last. I think of Frederick Douglass's words upon hearing slaves singing their sorrow songs in the fields. He laid waste to the nascent myth of the happy darky by saying, 'Slaves sing most when they are most unhappy.' Our dancing is our pleasure, but perhaps it is also our sorrow song." She continues, "My sons love to dance. I have raised them to young adulthood. They are beautiful. They are funny. They are strong. They are fascinating. They are kind. They are joyful in friendship and community. They are righteous and smart in their politics. They are learning. They are loving. They are mighty and alive. Yes, I am saying I measure my success as a mother of Black boys in part by the fact that I have sons who love to dance, who dance in community, who dance till their powerful bodies sweat, who dance and laugh, who dance and shout, who are able in the midst of their studying and organizing, their fear, their rage, their protesting, their vulnerability, their missteps and triumphs, their knowledge that they must fight the hydra-headed monster of racism and racial violence that we were not able to cauterize. They are able to find the joy and the power of communal self-expression. But our freedom, she concludes, must be seized and reasserted every day. Friends, my question for us today is, for what or whom do we need to make the time, to mark the time? I believe that making the time to mark the time for important personal and community life events can unlock the energy we need for transformation, the energy we need to reassert freedom every day. Dear ones, I'll leave you with these closing words by Arthur Foote. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our wills and love of truth forever guide us. May it be so.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.